Rylan Ward never planned to become a debt collector. He once worked with a mercenary crew, flying across rough star systems and doing dangerous jobs just to survive. But after too many battles and too many scars, he wanted something quieter. That was why he took a contract with a small trade company. His job was simple: pick up small debts from people who owed money, get the credits, and move on. Nothing heroic, nothing dramatic. On this day, he only needed to collect a small amount from Duke Sarek Vorn, a noble on Valaris 9. The debt was so tiny that most collectors would ignore it, but Ryland's boss made him go anyway, saying the company wanted proper records from all clients. Ryland didn't argue. He needed the job, he needed the money, and he didn't expect any trouble. Valaris 9 looked peaceful when his ship landed. The sky was a soft blue-violet color, and pale sunlight reflected off tall palace towers. The place looked clean, calm, and rich. Nothing suggested danger. Rylan walked toward the palace gates with relaxed steps, hands in his pockets, not worried at all. He even thought he might get a good meal from a local stall before flying away. But the moment he reached the gates, he felt something wrong. The guards stood stiff, eyes darting around, as if expecting an attack. When Rylan told them he came to collect a small debt, they exchanged quick, nervous looks. One guard hurried inside while the other told Rylan to wait. Rylan had collected debts from many worlds, and he had learned one thing: when guards were nervous, something bad was happening behind the walls. He tapped his foot, waiting. People passed by, servants with trembling hands, workers who avoided eye contact, messengers who moved faster than normal. No one looked relaxed. Rylan watched all this with growing curiosity. A small debt should not cause such tension. The guard returned and told him to follow. Rylan walked through the tall hallways, noticing cracks in the walls that looked recently patched, and shattered glass swept into corners. Something violent had happened here, something the palace was trying to hide. He entered the reception room, a wide space filled with tall windows and long curtains. Gold patterns covered the walls, but some were scratched. A broken vase lay in one corner, barely cleaned up. Rylan waited alone for a few minutes, hands crossed. He didn't like mysteries, especially when he had not chosen them. Then he heard a soft sound behind him. It wasn't a shout or a command. It was a small, quiet voice, almost like a whisper. When he turned, he saw her. A tall alien woman stood in the doorway, looking scared but trying to appear calm. Her skin had a gentle silver glow, and her eyes were bright teal, full of fear and sadness. Her clothes were elegant but torn at one shoulder. That was the first thing Rylan noticed. Her clothes looked damaged, not from an accident, but from rough hands. She stepped closer and whispered, "Human, please, can you help me?" Rylan stared at her. He didn't understand. He had come here for a small debt, nothing more. Before he could speak, she added, "He wants to give me away. The Duke. He wants to trade me to criminals." Her voice shook. She looked around like someone being hunted. Rylan felt a strange heaviness in his chest. He didn't know this woman. He didn't know the Duke. But he knew fear when he saw it. He lowered his voice and asked, "Why would he do that?" She swallowed and said, "He lost everything. His power, his reputation, his money. He made a foolish bet with a dangerous syndicate. They demanded payment, and he offered me." Rylan blinked. He didn't expect that. A noble handing over his own wife to pay a gambling debt, that was worse than anything he had seen in his mercenary days. She stepped closer, hands shaking. "Please, when they come, they will take me away. I don't want to go. I don't want to disappear." Her eyes begged him. Rylan's first instinct was to stay out of it. This wasn't his problem. He wasn't a hero, and he didn't want to get involved in noble family messes. He was here to grab payment and leave. But then he saw something, faint marks on her arms. the kind left by strong fingers gripping too hard. He saw how she kept glancing at the door like she expected someone to drag her away at any second. He couldn't ignore that. Before he could respond, footsteps echoed through the hallway. 3 tall guards walked in, faces stern, hands on their weapons. They moved toward the woman quickly. Rylan stepped forward without thinking. The lead guard growled, "Move aside! She belongs to the Duke! She is being collected!" Rylan didn't move. He spoke calmly. "She asked for help. You can wait." "She is not yours to protect," the guard snapped. Rylan raised a brow. "I don't need to own someone to stop harm." The guard's hand went to his weapon. The moment grew tense. Then a new voice entered the room. "Oh, let him take her. It solves all my problems." Duke Sarek Vorn walked in with slow, heavy steps. He was tall, reptilian, with dark green scales and golden eyes. His armor was cracked in places, and he looked exhausted, angry, and desperate. He moved toward Rylan with a mocking smile. "Human, you came for a debt, a small thing. Pathetic, really. But now you walk out with a far greater prize." Rylan frowned. "I don't know what you're talking about." The Duke chuckled. "Take her. Consider the debt paid. I don't care. She is useless to me now." The woman's breath caught in her throat. Rylan saw pain in her expression, the pain of someone treated like an object. Rylan crossed his arms. "I don't want your wife. I came for credits." "You will take her," the Duke hissed, "because it lets me save face. The Syndicate will think she was stolen, not handed over. And I keep my honor." Rylan realized the truth. The Duke wasn't giving her away freely. He was using Rylan to cover his own failure. The woman whispered, "Please, don't leave me." Rylan didn't know what to say. He felt the pressure of the moment closing around him. If he refused, the Duke's guards would drag her away. If he accepted, he would be responsible for her future. He looked at the Duke. "She comes with me freely, not as property." The Duke waved dismissively. "I don't care. Take her. Leave, and never return." He motioned to the guards, who stepped back instantly. The Duke turned and walked away, muttering angrily to himself. The woman looked at Rylan with wide, frightened eyes. She didn't speak, as if afraid everything might still disappear. Rylan sighed softly. He didn't want this responsibility, but he couldn't abandon her. Not after what he saw. Not after she asked for help with such desperation. He placed a gentle hand on her arm and said, "Come on, let's get out of here." She nodded quickly, almost in disbelief. They walked through the palace halls together. Workers watched them silently, whispering to each other. Some looked shocked, some looked relieved. Maybe they knew about the Duke's violent temper. Maybe they wished someone had helped sooner. When they stepped outside, the sunlight felt different, warmer, softer. The woman breathed it in like she had been held inside for too long. Rylan guided her toward his small ship. He kept glancing behind, expecting guards to rush out and stop them. But no one came. The Duke meant what he said. He wanted to be done with her. When they reached the ship's landing ramp, she stopped and turned to him. "You saved me," she whispered. Rylan shook his head. "I didn't save anyone. I just didn't want to see someone get dragged away." She looked at him for a long moment, eyes shimmering like polished stone. "My name is Arasha." "Rylan," he said, giving a small nod. She stepped onto the ship slowly, like someone entering a new world. Rylan followed her inside and powered up the engines. As the ship lifted off, Valaris 9 grew smaller beneath them. Rylan stared at the controls, wondering what he had just done. He didn't come here for adventure. He didn't come here to rescue anyone. He came for a boring job. And somehow, he was leaving with the Duke's alien wife, sitting quietly in the co-pilot's seat, watching him with uncertain hope. He felt the weight of fate shifting around them, even if he didn't understand it yet. He made a quick stop to collect a simple gambling debt, but he left with a frightened noblewoman whose life had just changed forever. Rylan expected silence from Arasha once they left the moon's atmosphere, but she stayed close to him, sitting in the co-pilot's chair with tense shoulders and wide eyes. She kept her hands folded tightly in her lap, as if afraid to touch anything. Rylan didn't blame her. She had just escaped a palace where her life was treated like a bargaining chip. He kept his voice calm as he piloted the ship through open space. "We'll be safe for a little while," he said. "No one from the Duke's palace followed us." Arasha didn't answer at first. Her teal eyes stared out the window at the fading shape of Valaris 9. It looked peaceful from this distance, but she knew better. That world had been a cage, and she had lived inside it for too long. Finally, she whispered, "Thank you." Rylan shook his head. "I didn't do much." "You did everything," she replied softly. "No one else tried, not even my own people in that palace." Her voice carried emotions she tried to hide: fear, relief, confusion, and something else Rylan couldn't identify. He turned his attention to the navigation system, selecting a safe star route. "I'm taking us toward the outer rings for now. No major ports, no patrol routes. We'll stay off the grid until we know what's coming." "What do you think is coming?" she asked. "A reaction," he said. "The Duke doesn't seem like the type to let something go." Arasha closed her eyes for a moment. "You're right about that." Rylan noticed how she sat at the edge of her seat, her back perfectly straight. She didn't know how to relax. Life in a noble palace must have taught her to always appear proper, always careful. He wondered how many years she had lived under such pressure. He didn't want to scare her more, but he needed answers if he was going to keep her safe. "Arasha," he began gently, "I need to ask something. Why would the Duke risk everything? Why offer you to criminals? You're his wife, right?" She flinched, not from anger, but from a painful memory. "I was given to him through an alliance agreement. My family believed they were strengthening political ties. But the Duke never cared about me. He only cared about the power my lineage could bring." Rylan glanced at her. "What kind of power?" She hesitated, then answered in a soft voice. "My people have a rare ability. Some of us can sense emotional signals: fear, anger, pain, lies. We can feel them like waves in the air. In my childhood, they said I carried this gift strongly, but the Duke feared it. He didn't want anyone near him who could sense his secrets." Rylan understood now why the Duke treated her like a threat instead of a partner. People in power hated being exposed. Arasha continued. When his gambling debts grew too heavy, he panicked. He knew the syndicate would not wait. He needed something valuable to offer, something rare. She looked down at her hands. "That was me." Rylan felt anger burn quietly inside him. He didn't show it, but it was there, pulsing in his chest. He didn't like cruel people. He had seen enough of them in his mercenary years. "You're safe now," he said. "I'll make sure of it." She looked at him, her eyes full of disbelief. "Why would you help me?" "You're a stranger." Rylan shrugged lightly. "Because you needed help. Because it was the right thing to do. Because I've seen too much to walk away from something like that." Arasha stared at him for a long moment, as if trying to read him through her strange ability. Maybe she did sense something. Honesty, maybe. Determination. A good heart behind a tired face. "Thank you," she whispered again. They traveled in silence for several minutes before Rylan changed course toward a small asteroid belt. He needed to lose any tracking signals the palace may have placed. He guided the ship between slowly rotating rocks and drifting metallic debris. The engines hummed steadily, and the cabin lights dimmed to a soft blue glow. Arasha watched his hands move across the controls. "You fly very smoothly," she said shyly. Years of practice, he replied, and a lot of running away from bad decisions. She tilted her head. You were a mercenary? He gave a small nod. A long time ago. I got tired of fighting. Debt collecting seemed quieter. She looked around the ship. Is it quieter? He gave a dry laugh. Not today. For the first time since he met her, Arasha smiled. It was a small smile, but it softened her features, making her look almost peaceful. Rylan felt something shift inside him again. He quickly looked away before she saw. An alarm blinked on the screen. Rylan leaned closer. Something's wrong. Arasha tensed. Are they following us? No, Rylan said slowly. Something else. A small signal. Weak. Like a hidden transmitter. He stood from his seat and walked to the supply locker. Stay here. Arasha watched him nervously as he searched through tools. After a few seconds, he found a small scanning device and moved toward her chair. Hold still, he said. She froze as he waved the scanner around her. A faint beep sounded when he reached her shoulder. Rylan frowned. There it is. He gently lifted the torn part of her sleeve and found a tiny metal shard embedded in the fabric, almost invisible. A tracker, he muttered. No wonder I felt uneasy. Arasha's breathing quickened. The Duke. He must have placed it when he... She stopped herself before finishing the sentence. She didn't want to describe what she had gone through. Rylan spoke softly. It's okay. I'll remove it. He used a small tool to pinch the tracker out of the fabric and crushed it under his boot. The ship's sensors instantly cleared, showing no remaining signals. Arasha let out a long breath. I didn't know he put that on me. That's because he didn't want you to know, Rylan said. She looked away again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was shame. Rylan sat back down in the pilot's seat. You have nothing to feel ashamed of. She blinked, startled. How did you know what I was feeling? His expression softened. You look down like someone feeling guilty. But this isn't your fault. The Duke's choices are his own. You didn't cause this. Arasha's eyes warmed for a moment, as if grateful for his understanding. She sat straighter, and her voice steadied. Thank you. I've been blamed for many things in that palace. It's strange to hear someone say it's not my fault. Rylan felt a pull inside him again. He ignored it and focused on the stars ahead. We're going to stop at an abandoned mining station, he said. I used to hide there when things got messy. We'll rest, get new clothes for you, maybe patch up the ship. Arasha almost smiled again. A hideout? Something like that. She sat quietly for a moment, then said, Rylan, may I ask something? Sure. If we stay hidden, what will you do with me afterward? Rylan had expected the question, but he still didn't have a perfect answer. I don't own you, he said. You're free to choose. She lowered her eyes. I've never been allowed to choose anything before. Then maybe it's time you learn, he said gently. She stared at him with a soft, vulnerable look. For the first time, she wasn't trembling. She was simply watching him, studying his face like he was something new and strange. Rylan felt her gaze and looked away, pretending to adjust a control. We'll figure things out, he said. The mining station appeared ahead, a dark metallic structure floating between asteroid shadows. No lights, no movement, no signs of life. Perfect for hiding. Rylan guided the ship into a docking bay. The doors opened with a long creaking sound. Dust floated in the air like a forgotten mist. He shut off the engines and turned to Arasha. Stay close. It's safe, but old. She nodded and followed him down the ramp. Her steps were slow and careful, like she expected the floor to collapse. The station interior was cold and silent. Old crates were stacked in corners. Rust covered the walls. A faint hum from ancient generators echoed in the distance. Arasha wrapped her arms around herself. It's dark. I know, Rylan said. Let me get the lights. He walked to a control panel and flipped several switches. Weak yellow lights flickered on, revealing empty rooms and forgotten machinery. The place felt lonely but peaceful. Arasha stepped forward, touching a dusty wall. This place feels calm. It's the closest thing I have to a home, Rylan said quietly. She turned to him with surprise. This? He shrugged. Mercenaries don't get real homes. This is where I used to think about life when I needed space. Arasha looked around again, seeing the station with new eyes. Not as a broken place, but as a safe corner of the galaxy where no one demanded obedience from her. Rylan watched her, noticing how her shoulders loosened slightly. She was still scared, still uncertain, but she looked lighter here, away from the palace walls. He walked to a storage cabinet and pulled out a blanket, handing it to her. You must be cold. She accepted it gently. I am. Thank you. Rylan set up a small heater and powered a portable lamp. The room brightened with a warm glow. Arasha sat on a crate, wrapped in the blanket like a shield. She watched Rylan work for a long moment, then said in a quiet voice, I feel something. I don't know how to explain it. What do you mean? He asked. You, she whispered. You feel safe, strong, good. Rylan cleared his throat, unsure how to respond. I'm just doing what anyone should do. Not anyone, she said softly. Just you. He didn't answer. He didn't trust his voice. Arasha looked around the small room. What will happen now? Rylan sat across from her. The Duke is going to come after us. He'll want to restore his pride. And he'll want you back, not because he cares, but because he hates losing. Arasha tightened the blanket. Then what do? We prepare, Rylan said, and we stay hidden until we have a plan. Arasha nodded slowly. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, she felt like she could breathe. Rylan didn't know where all this was going, but he knew one thing. He wasn't leaving her. Not now. Not after everything she had been through. And deep inside, Arasha felt something she had never felt before.